What evil prank have you pulled off? Early days of network PCs, DOS, and NetWare, I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I and a few other students and employees wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log on to the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had two coworkers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken the lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance for most of their working hours. They would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly, this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these two and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look at an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it which noted how long it had been since this prank had last been triggered, ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program which would wait a random time, between 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then drop an image of two dudes on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. I tested it, put the compiled program in place, and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. Here's an interesting bit that I did not share initially. This was the late 80s, early 90s, so where did I find this image to use? One day, I and a few of the other student workers were playing around with a new disk utility that helped visualize where space was being used, an important thing in the days of 20 megabyte hard drives. We had meant to use it to see where some of our network storage had gone, but the utility scanned all the drives on a PC, including the networked ones. At the time, as fate would have it, sitting in the CD-ROM drive was a Borland Turbo C installation disk. It popped up in the final report as having a single hidden directory, labeled XXX of all things, that contained more data than the entirety of the Turbo C installation combined. It was all in high-resolution 640 by 480 VGA glory to boot. A hidden folder containing nothing but explicit content had somehow managed to be included on Borland CD-ROM that had been purchased by thousands of businesses and educational institutions. Story 2. Mom can't tolerate sweet things. Since she can remember, she never ate sweets. When I was 6 or so, during breakfast, Mom left her newly brewed coffee on the table. My older brother encouraged me to put more sugar as a prank, so I did. Mom came back, stirred, and then drank and spit out a rocket. We started laughing, saying it was a prank, explaining that we put extra sugar in it. She looked at us as if we were stupid. Apparently, I put salt instead. Her coffee was at sea salt level. Another one, I have an extra mouse in my desk drawer at work. I have the USB plugged into the docking station of the obnoxious guy a couple of cubes away. On days he's particularly obnoxious, I will take out the extra mouse and move it around every few minutes. He has never realized because it's plugged into the docking station and not his laptop. He has even had the laptop replaced, never noticed. It brings me to tears all the time, silently laughing sometimes. I have to be careful not to overdo it. Story 3. My coworkers in the Chicago office asked me to bring back a phone book and the hotel stationery from my business trip to Kansas City. They were preparing for another coworker's bachelor party for the night before the wedding. The groom was known for drinking to an extent that was considered legendary. After a night of drinking, he woke up on the morning of his wedding in a hotel room. He checked the nightstand and found the Kansas City phone book. The desk was stocked with KC stationery. His friends had clued the front desk staff in on what was happening and convinced them to answer his room phone. Good morning and welcome to Kansas City Holiday Inn. It was 5 hours till the wedding and he was actually only a couple of miles from the venue, but the freakout was epic. Alright, so far this one is sublime. I'm definitely going to bookmark this one in case I have to do something similar in the future. Story 4. Gradually, over the course of 2 weeks, moved my coworkers' monitors closer to the front edge of the desk, like about a quarter inch per move until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. Stupid small desk, she grumbled near the end. I then moved them back just as slowly over a few weeks. She never caught on. Also, I made a friend believe she was being followed by a garden gnome for years. Many of her friends are involved, plus other helpers. She showed up at a B&B in Scotland that we'd recommended, and there was a gnome in the garden, and it looked exactly like the gnome that briefly turned up in her yard. Then she saw it on her way to work. Then in Provence and Germany, it really did look like the same gnome. It was. Story 5. Had a friend and coworker regularly bring up how annoying it was where someone would walk by him and just so uncomfortably close. There was plenty of room between the back of his chair and the wall, but daily he'd feel this guy walk past him. Wasn't trying to be a creep, just a lack of self-awareness in the office, clearly. My friend tried doing a few things to try to get this guy to notice it was annoying, but of course, never actually spoke to him, as the dude was more senior and he was intimidated. Whatever, I had an idea. Every day, he'd pull his desk back towards the wall a little bit closer. He knew it wasn't going to work immediately, but after a few weeks of slowly moving the desk, the annoying coworker would have to shuffle sideways to make it. My friend would often busy himself and not help or make a really big deal out of getting out of his way. Eventually, annoying coworkers started taking another route through the office where no one was inconvenienced, and my friend slowly moved his desk back to its original spot. Story 6. Over a decade ago, I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping, and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store and a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in, even though it was not a public dumpster. One day, we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair/box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Also, my mom's laptop wallpaper was a picture of her granddaughter. I copied the picture 100 times and made her wallpaper a slideshow of the same picture over and over again, so the file would change, but nothing would change visibly on the monitor. The pictures would change every 10 seconds. In one of the images, I painted a tiny little curly mustache on her. So randomly, for 10 seconds, my niece would have a mustache. My mom thought she was either losing her mind or had a computer virus, and every time the mustache popped up, it was gone by the time she tried to show anyone. All I can think of is the mom saying, "There was a mustache, I swear, a mustache." And then, of course, it goes back to the normal picture. Crazy mom. Story 7. I worked at a fast food place where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. In the super hot summer days, we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other, but mine were always tame until one day. He left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a vinegar packet, cut open a corner, and put a straw directly into it, and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in front of the store and I hear him spit and scream my name while calling me names. He still high-fived me. Another one night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. It took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. Story 8. I replaced a single system sound file, the click for the mouse, with a 5-minute version. It started off identical, followed by 4 minutes and 50 seconds of silence, but at the end, it had me screaming. Now, if another system sound would play, it stopped playing the previous sound. So he would use his computer, and then when he would walk away, it might scream 5 minutes later. He did come to me, but it was for help since I was pretty good with computers. Also, why he dropped off the PC with me when he first bought it. Him explaining what was going on was difficult to keep a straight face. He rarely had his speakers on, so it took a while for him to notice, and when it did happen, he was usually pretty far away from the computer to know it came from it, thought it was something else. It wasn't until he was working on a paper late one night when it happened, and it happened a lot. Between the crappy microphone and me screaming too loud, my voice wasn't recognizable, just a loud noise coming from the speakers. He tried to show me, but I would make sure to never let the time hit 5 minutes, except for right before I was going to leave. Then I played all interested. I made up a story about how it could be a nasty virus, but then said it only came from really bad sites. He was mortified. That is when I lost it and had to come clean. Looking back, it was a dangerous bluff, but those were more innocent times. He and I did have some good pranks back and forth for a few years. Story 9. People in school used to always take my Gatorade, so I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person spit salt water in the middle of class only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. Picked out every last marshmallow from my sister's box of Lucky Charms. Then I took a photo of me eating a bowl of just Charms, printed it, and put it in the bottom of the bag. I then sealed the bag back up, hot glued the box, and back in the pantry it went. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit, I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. I like it. Simple, elegant, thoughtfully harmless, perfect prank, and with elbows too. Social distancing, am I right? Oh, and since you're already halfway through the video, it's not going to take too much trouble for me to ask you to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, right? So please do that because it really helps me out. Let's go ahead and get back to the stories. Story 10. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess for a whole weekend. Saturday went well enough, and I was happy with how I went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later, I got a phone call from him saying, "Manager and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating while my dad is telling my mom, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. A prank I did pull off, though. I remember it was like yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it, so the next day, when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. Story 11. One year, my sister had to move back into my parents' house. I was like 15, she was a little older, mid-20s. April Fool's comes, and I know my sister woke up at like 6 a.m. So I took out the light in the kitchen, put Vaseline all on the refrigerator handle, and put a rubber band around the water gun on the sink. I waited for her to go into the kitchen. I was in my room pretending to be asleep, and all I heard was crap, followed by a crap, followed by her screaming my name and waking up my parents. My parents were not happy. The floor was soaked with water, and it woke both of them up. I do it again though. Water gun thing, there's a small little black sprayer to the right of the sink. You pull it out, it has a hose connected to it, and you can spray down dishes and such. Story 12. I was 9 and my dad just had hernia surgery the day prior and was recuperating on the couch. Before I left for school, I put the Martha Stewart channel on and left the remote just beyond his reach. He spent 8 hours learning how to arrange pillows on a bed. He exacted his revenge 15 years later. I just had my emergency C-section and he put Frozen on and left it on loop while the entire family left for the mall and left the remote just out of my reach. Revenge is indeed a dish best served cold. Welded a coworker's boot to the floor. He had worn out the toe caps on his steel-toed boots while he was making a weld kneeling inside a large piece of equipment on steel. I put a small tack weld on his boot so he had trouble breaking it loose and getting up. And one that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams for those outside the US on April 1st. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night, I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home, my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that there had been an error, and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a day to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. The fact that she let you believe it until the next day is more evil than anything else. Story 13. Late 1970s, so the statutes of limitations is passed. Worked in the local library as a teen, and some guy did something that pissed off my coworker and then best friend. So we started harvesting blow-in postcards from the magazine section, every magazine, and hand-wrote the jerk's name and address on hundreds at least of postcards. Free subscription? Sure. Collectible plates? Yep. Columbia Records, enjoy your free dozen Albanian opera records. Book of the month, silver spoons, travel offers, cruises, bring them all on. Do you know how many magazines libraries get, or got back then? The New Yorker, Sports Illustrated, Cosmo, Playboy, Reader's Digest, Car and Driver, Road and Track, National Geographic, Photography, Model Railroading, Science Fiction, every niche you can imagine. And we had 13 months or more of each. We'd grab a couple of cards or a dozen per shift, fill them out, and drop them in random mailboxes when we were out on our bikes. It took a couple months to kick in and several more months for the tsunami to really hit. USPS stopped delivering to his house. Police were called, but the processing houses evidently didn't keep the postcards and my prints weren't in the system yet anyway. We stopped after a Christmas break flurry. Until right before school started the following summer, one last blast of probably 50 more postcards with the most bizarre and offensive offers we could find. No one ever suspected us. Story 14. Not sure, but my best New Year's was that of 1999. I was 9 years old at the time, and I worked together with my dad to pull off the greatest prank in history. A few months before midnight, I synced up a wristwatch with a countdown on TV. My dad pointed me in the direction of the breaker, which was in our garage, and showed me the lever to pull, which would cut all power to the house. Now, I don't know if you remember the hype, but the year 2000 was supposed to destroy all of our computers and technology, sending us back to the Stone Ages. So the moment grew closer as I watched the seconds tick by on my wristwatch, and it soon became apparent that I wouldn't need it as I could hear all my relatives inside counting 10, 9, 8, 2, 1. I pulled the lever at the perfect timing and everything went black. The first thing I heard was from my aunt, "Oh my God, it hit! Y2K hit!" I was only going to leave the power out for 10 seconds or so, but the lever was stuck and I couldn't get it back up for about 2 minutes, during which the whole time I heard my family freaking out. Then eventually they looked outside and started to wonder why our neighbors still had power. Thinking back, I really wish we would have recorded this, probably could have won $10,000. Y2K was a big deal back then. I was 10 and visiting my grandparents in Texas for Christmas and New Year's. Our return flight was at like 10 a.m. New Year's Day 2000. My mom figured if something was going to happen, it wouldn't be on the 10 a.m. flight since they would have had plenty of time to figure it out. We ended up flying home on an almost empty Boeing 777, I think based on the 333 configuration since that's all I really remember. My sister and I had our own rows to ourselves, and this new plane had seat-back entertainment with TV shows and some simple video games with a controller that popped out of the seat. This was like the best flight I think I've ever been on. Story 15. I saw a post about switching around mayo and vanilla pudding, emptied out a mayo jar and cleaned it well, filled it with a few pots worth of vanilla pudding, and took it to uni. Our uni is very lax about eating during the lecture, so I waited until midday when I was sitting in the middle of all my friends and they were all eating the lunch. Cue me taking out the jar of mayo and a spoon, popping the lid, and taking a big old spoonful with a grin. At first, only the closest ones noticed, but after the third spoon, it was like everyone was frozen around me. Pin drop silence. After the fifth spoon, someone fake retched and the spell was broken. The looks of sheer terror and disgust was well worth the pain of eating vanilla pudding. I'm a chocolate kind of gal. How about doing blue Gatorade in a Windex bottle next? Story 16. When my brother and I were in middle school, my brother liked to skateboard with our next-door neighbor. One day, my brother and the neighbor took the sheet of plywood from under my brother's upper bunk bed, no one slept in the upper bunk, out of the house and started making a skateboard ramp out of it in the neighbor's adjacent yard. My parents had explicitly told him that he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, in my defense, my brother teased me unmercifully to the point of tears on multiple occasions, so keep in mind that he had it coming for a long time. Anyway, an evil little plan hatched in my brain. I ran to the upstairs window and yelled down at them, brother's name, "Guess what? Mom knows everything and she is so mad." Then I slammed the window shut and ran to the stairs and waited while watching my mom read the newspaper. A few moments later, my brother walks in the front door looking worried and says, "Mom, I'm sorry." My mom, who had no idea what was going on, said, "About what?" While slowly putting the newspaper down. "For making a skateboard ramp out of the wood from the bunk bed." "You did what?" At that moment, a wave of shock and realization swept across my brother's face, and our eyes met. I let out the biggest, evilest little sister cackle and ran into my room. We're adults now and still laugh about it from time to time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you're also going to enjoy what's the cruelest prank you've ever seen. Story 3 was unbelievably wild. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.